This week was really just about finishing up the assignments for the semester. I did the NEAT Video 8, which I posted a song written about physics that these kids performed to a Backstreet Boys song. I also watched 4 other videos and commented on their posts. I watched another lecture this week on Intelligence Squared, which was on the topic, Global Warming is Not a Crisis. This was a precursor debate to the one I watched last week, and this one had Michael Crichton as a speaker, which was very interesting. I watched and did all the materials posted for each Project 3 video, which you will hear about later in this video. I also did the debates on the discussion board, which was very time-consuming, very interesting. I really liked the discussion board this semester because I feel like everyone had good input and were very honest about their opinions. And finally, I produced my end of the semester movie, which I posted on my ePort. I learned a lot this week, especially from my debate about global warming. It was really interesting to hear from people that think that global warming isn't a crisis, since for so long all I've heard about global warming is how bad it needs to be stopped. I also learned a lot from the debates we did. We learned so much about GMOs and the moon landing and 9/11 conspiracies, and it was very educational discussions that were happening, so I learned a lot from that. I also learned a lot this week from the project videos. I learned about lasers, the gamma knife procedure, electrical stimulation, x-rays, and thermal imaging. Questions this week are really more conceptual, such as, what can I do to help the world with global warming and poverty? How can I decrease my carbon output? First, I watched the LASER project, and I learned a lot. First, I learned that LASER is an acronym, which I had no idea. I also learned a lot about the history of lasers, which I found really interesting. The scientists that came up with the machine can be traced back to like the 1950s, and it was their goal to study molecular structure. So it's kind of interesting that that turned into lasers, which is used so widespread now. It was cool to learn that a laser can kill a tissue without heat damage to the nearby tissue, which is why it's optimal for eye surgery. I learned that laser light is only one wavelength, which is why it's only one color, and this causes it to be so directed and powerful. I think it's remarkable that they can use the right amount of energy to excite all the electrons at once and make them move in one direction. So that was really cool to learn the physics actually behind lasers. I also learned what astigmatism was, because I didn't really know what that was. I really liked their animated video that they had on their tattoo removal. It was very thorough and cool. I would like to know more about how pigments are naturally broken down by our immune system. Also, another question is, does laser surgery hurt at all? Is there any side effects like soreness and whatnot? The next project I looked at was the gamma knife. I learned that the gamma knife is actually a machine that the patient is placed in, kind of like an MRI machine. I always thought it was a tool they used in surgery. I learned that gamma ray beams, a single ray beam cannot do any damage, but when you make all the beams come together in one focal point, it can create extensive damage. I learned that this procedure usually only needs to be done once, unlike radiation therapy where there's many treatment sessions. I learned that the recovery time is very quick and that the effects take place over time. I also learned that it could be used to help OCD, not just curing cancer. I thought it was really cool that they talked to a real neurosurgeon and real patients. And I also liked one of the quotes that the neurosurgeon said, which is that the Gamma Knife is as close to as drive-through neurosurgery as you're going to get. Questions I have there ever been any accidents using this procedure? And can they only use this treatment for the head, or has it been tested on other parts of the body? Next, I looked at the electrical stimulation treatment project. I have seen a TENS unit before, but I was interested to learn how it worked. I learned about the history of this therapy, which came about from a fish. I learned how useful this treatment is for muscular rehab patients, which is great, since I used to just think it was for pain. I learned that electrical stimulation can help with strengthening the muscles as well. I really liked how in-depth they went about how electricity affects our tissue. I really liked the interview they had with Stacy, who is very knowledgeable, and I think it was brave that they demonstrated on themselves. Question I have is, I am wondering how it would feel to have no control of your muscles, and what could this treatment lead to in the future? Then there was the thermal imaging project, which I thought was unique and different than all of the other projects. In this video, I learned that all objects actually emit infrared radiation, and that infrared means below the red. I learned about emissivity. I really liked their interview with the police officer about thermal imaging in a helicopter. I learned a lot of actual imaging cameras that they use in the Phoenix Police Department. Question I have is, how can you use these cameras so that the handprint on the car was seen after it lifted up? Also, what else could these cameras have use for in the future? Finally, I watched the X-ray video, where I learned that photons can be created by introducing electrons to tungsten, and this is how they create X-rays in the X-ray tube. I learned that on a radiograph, the bones appear white because they have absorbed some of the energy. I really liked their introduction to their video because it was a little funny skit. I thought the facility she went to was very cool, and it was interesting to look at something medical in the point of view for horses, not just humans. I learned a lot from the interview with the doctor they talked to. Questions I have is, first, how many X-rays can we have before we start to see side effects? Also, how does lead covering help protect us from the radiation? Now, I can't really talk about next week's goals since this is the last week. However, after this course, I have a different outlook on physics and technology. Although I was skeptic and somewhat frustrated sometimes with this course format, I feel I've learned a lot. I'm grateful that we weren't forced equations down our throat like Physics 101. I hope to keep in touch with the scientific discoveries and debates that are current events, which I never really paid attention to before this class. And I just want to say thank you, David, and everyone for such a wonderful semester.
Come up to meet you, tell you I'm sorry.